This very well might be the end of Path of Exile as we know it. However, that is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, I know that people who have played this game for a long time and miss the way that Path of Exile used to play have been absolutely rejoicing lately. The game is finally going to slow down, we're going to get back the game that we had years ago. However, on the other end of the spectrum, there are a bunch of people who just started playing this game in the last year or two who are absolutely freaking out. But I just want to say that although my initial reaction to it was very mixed, some negative, some positive, I do think that potentially there is going to be more positive coming out of these changes than negative. However, we are going to have to see how the implementation of all these new things actually lays out. We're getting a bunch of new skill gems. Maybe these will be good. In the last couple of years, most of the new skills that they've given us have actually been quite good and quite meta-defining. We'll see if that continues with these new skills that we're getting here in this patch. They also said that we're getting a huge, just massive nerf to all damage. Will this actually give us more variability in the different things that are going to be meta? Or is it really just going to lock in a much smaller meta and cut out a bunch of the lower performing builds? Will the new Flask changes actually be good? Is adding another currency that we have to roll on Flask beyond alteration orbs and such really going to do that much good for the system? I'm also going to give you an idea of what my plans are for my content going up to the release of 3.15 and what you can look forward to. Hey guys, Big Ducks here. Remember to like the video if you're enjoying this style of content, and if you're part of the huge percentage of people who are still not subscribed, make sure that you do that so that these videos will show right up in your feed. I appreciate all your support greatly. Now let's get back into the video. So, typically around this time is when we get the big hype train rolling and everybody's excited for the new expansion, the new league. We're gonna get a bunch of cool stuff, new cool abilities, new cool things to do. And this time things were a little bit different. We got nerfs and nerfs, and nerfs, maybe with a little bit of side of nerfs, and oh yeah, and some nerfs. So most things in the game are getting pretty heavily nerfed, and because of this, I'm going to kind of try to set some expectations for my content going forward. One thing that I do want to talk about is that there's a chance that a lot of builds are probably just not going to really be good anymore. I know what they said is that diversity should go up. I'm not convinced of that. I think that build diversity is going to go down. So that means that I'm kind of changing the builds that I'm going to be releasing for this time. Normally I do 5 build guides. I might not be able to do 5 just because I have a full-time job and I'm waiting a little bit longer to put out these builds, at least until the balance manifesto this time, because I'm kind of getting the vibe this time around that they're going to really nerf some stuff. Typically I feel pretty safe, and people have criticized me in the past of a notorious streamer who puts out build guides way too early, and it's like, well, most of the time I've been fine. I'd say about 95% of the time the nerfs were exactly within my expectations, so it's perfectly fine most of the time. However, I feel like my ability to guess is not going to be as good this time around. So just expect maybe some different content, maybe 3 or 4 build guides this time around. I'm going to try to specifically focus on making the builds that I think are safe. We're probably not going to go too outside of the box this time. I think it's safer to choose a very safe build this time. A video on choosing a build guide soon. But as I said previously, this patch is about nerfing Path of Exile into the ground. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, only time will tell at this point, honestly. I think that there are pretty equal chances of it being a very good thing and a very bad thing, and it could just be mediocre and we could just be getting debated again and nothing could change whatsoever, who knows? But the first thing that I want to talk about is flasks. Now, most of the time in Path of Exile, when I think of flasks, I think of just sitting here with my keyboard and just going, and that's it. That's all that flasks end up being. For a long time, I've really felt like flasks were just kind of a dead mechanic, and it was just annoying, and it was just hurting my wrists from having to just spam flasks every 4 or 5 seconds, and it really didn't do anything cool. Originally, when I started playing Path of Exile years ago, flasks were one of the coolest things and one of the main reasons that I actually was excited about PoE as a game, and as time went on, they just became this kind of like constant thing that you always had to have going, and you know, it's not really that cool after 10 years of doing it. So I'm really happy that they are going to be massively revamping flasks. However, I'm a little bit worried. If you didn't see the reveal, in the reveal they talked about how they are overall nerfing flasks in general in a power sense, and they're going to be splitting flasks into auto-procking flasks and then like super powerful flasks, but they don't gain charges while they're active, and then there's just going to be like the middle flasks, which are just non-enchanted. This should be interesting, but honestly, with the amount of things going on and all the stuff happening in Path of Exile, I'm probably mainly going to be using the auto-proc flask because I think that that's going to be best. That's at least for me. For people who really want a more in-depth and active playstyle when it comes to flasks, that's not me. You'll have some more interesting decisions to make when it comes to flasks. However, there is one massive thing that they changed about flasks that I super duper do not agree with, and that is the fact that Curse immunity on Flask is not a thing anymore, and ailment immunity flasks are only going to give you ailment immunity for 1 second, and that's if you actually do remove that ailment. Now, the main reason that I have problems with this is just that it is so ridiculously difficult sometimes to tell if you actually have an ailment on you. Chill and freeze is obvious. There is a visceral difference in gameplay when you get chilled or frozen. When you get shocked, half the time I don't even know. When you get ignited, most of the time I don't even know. I feel like we need some kind of like visual effect on the screen or something that we can opt into that gives like a shocked effect on the edges of the screen or an ignited effect on the edges of the screen, just so I even know that I'm ignited. Now, you will be able to get flasks, they said, that will auto proc when you get shocked or ignited, and it will just remove it automatically, which I think is really cool, but they're going to be way weaker versions of those flasks. We're going to have to see how that goes, but when it comes to curses, I'm a little bit worried, because what this is going to mean is that builds that can go curse immune or curse unaffected will probably have a much easier time mapping than other builds, and then it also means that we're going to have to itemize for things like LE weakness and vulnerability and things like that. Like, resistances are going to have to be stacked significantly higher now for being able to do LE weakness maps. And the problem that stems from that is the fact that most of the time, GGG always says, oh, well, we want players to be, you know, doing like accounting for all of these different things and rolling their gear specifically to handle these maps. And unfortunately, what happens instead most of the time is that the path of least resistance is just not playing the map and re-rolling it into something else. I'm kind of worried that that's just going to become the norm now. Curse maps are going to be just oh yeah, we'll just roll past that for a lot of people. So that's kind of unfortunate for me, at least. And the next part of the nerfs, and this is probably the big part that we really do need to talk about, is going to be player damage overall. In the announcement said that is going to get a 20 to 40% overall damage nerf for everything. That's a lot of damage. I am kind of worried about this, because the thing that I think about is the fact that build diversity is already kind of rough right now, and I feel that if you have all of these mid and low tier builds that only just kind of work at the moment, and they just barely do enough damage to be able to sustain through the game, and they're going to be increasing the difficulty of the game in general, they're going to be making the enemies more difficult, they're making flasks harder to account for things, all of these things together, it's gonna make a lot of those lower tier builds just not function anymore. I feel, at least. Some people are saying, and Chris and GGG seem to think, that bringing everything down so much will bring more diversity. I feel the opposite. Now, I could be wrong here, and I would be more than overjoyed to be wrong. However, I kind of feel like we're going to lose diversity. Those builds that are the upper performing builds that have tons of damage and work perfectly well and have lots of defensive layers are going to survive perfectly fine, and they will still be very good. Other builds that maybe aren't as powerful or don't have as many cool defensive layers or offensive layers or do as much damage might not do as well. We're going to have to see. I really hope that this doesn't reduce diversity of builds, and I hope that it doesn't hurt the lower tier builds more. Who knows? We're really going to have to see. The second part of this player overall damage nerf and the flasks and all of that that you have to think about is that on average, enemies are going to take longer to die now. And with enemies taking longer to die, maps being harder, progression being slowed by the fact that things are going to be more difficult and you're going to spend more time to be able to get all the items, get through the content, you're going to have to play slower most likely a little bit to be able to survive some things. All of these things together, while not really a problem in and of themselves, don't, as far as I can see, take into account the fact that the Atlas and everything that you're supposed to do in it is set up for a power creeped meta, right? Right now the game is set up and it takes so long to get everything done that an average like time spent player, someone that plays like 20 or less hours per week, is now going to have to take maybe twice as long, if these nerfs are as bad as they're saying that they're going to be, to get everything done that they want to do. The game in its current state is set up to where power creep has dictated how much time it takes to do everything in the game. Now, if they account for this, that would be great. I am perfectly on board with the game becoming more difficult and the game having more interesting choices to be made, as long as I don't have to spend 20 to 40% more time to get the same things that I did before. As long as that's the case, I'm good with it. A revamp of the game and bringing it more towards being a difficult game with meaningful choices would be pretty nice. But we have been debated many times in the past, so here's hoping. So we also got a ton of new abilities. 19 new gems, I think, is the amount that we're getting. I'm pretty sure that's skills and support gems, I'm pretty sure. And at first glance, these are some of the most interesting abilities that we've seen so far, by far in my opinion. Most of the time we get like a new subset of abilities. I think we got the physical spells that spend life instead of mana this recent patch, or we get like physical gems like the Blade Blast stuff, or we got like the Hex Blast and curse changes and all of that. We typically get like a set of cool things, right? This time we're getting 19 new gems, and most of them are revolving around each different ascendancy class. So each ascendancy class has a gem or skill or support gem made specifically for them. Now, there's a lot of cool ones, but the main thing that I personally noticed is that a lot of these seem very Diablo 2 influenced. I don't know if you guys remember, but Hammerdins were really popular in Diablo 2, and this gem that's called Spectral Helix looks a little familiar. And then also we got a new ability called Eye of Winter, and it looks a little bit like Frozen Orb. Let's just be honest here. We got quite a few abilities that just remind me very, very much so of Diablo 2. Not a bad thing, but definitely interesting. However, there are two abilities in particular that I am very interested in. And I think that if you follow my streams over at twitch.tv/BigDucks, which you should go follow by the way, you might be surprised as to the two types of abilities that I'm actually really excited for. The Slam ability and the Minion ability. Those are two archetypes that I actually hate. I don't like either of them at all. Slams are very boring to me because it's basically like a carpal tunnel syndrome trying to press all of the different buttons, and it feels like I'm playing a DPS rotation in WoW. Not fun to me. However, the new Totem Slam ability, Earthbreaker support, that makes it so that you can summon a totem that has a slam ability as its use, that's awesome. Being able to fill the screen with a whole bunch of slams as like a chieftain or something like that sounds really, really, really cool. And then the other ability, Summon Reaper, which summons one very powerful Reaper minion that eats your other minions and like gets buffs from eating them or something like that. The things that come to mind are like, what if you played an Elementalist with auto respawning golems and then the Reaper like ate the golems constantly? Would that work? That's a pretty cool idea. But the way that it works is that it's a single minion. You kind of dictate where it moves and where it attacks, and it likes to be alone. I really didn't like the minion playstyle where it was just like, you have this legion of minions at your command and they all just kind of run around and do crazy stuff, and you don't really have any direct control over them. This looks a lot more like my style. So that's pretty cool. I'm really excited to see some new skills that I'm pretty excited for. I'm probably going to be trying to make build guides for a couple of the new abilities. We'll see how it goes. However, when it comes to abilities, and keep in mind we actually may get this and they might have just not told us yet, when it comes to new abilities and old abilities, I'd really like to see some more revamps of older abilities instead of like more new abilities. We got 19 new support and skill gems. I'd like to see some of those older abilities revamped as well. So hopefully we get some of those too. Now, Big Ducks, you spent this entire video talking about things that aren't actually the League. Aren't you excited about the League? What about the League, Big Ducks? It looks cool. It doesn't look anything super special. It looks like there might be some kind of like new in-game system going there with the tomes and stuff that they had. I'm really curious to see how it actually feels to play, because as it's set right now, it's basically like you choose some little spots to detonate, you spawn a bunch of monsters, you fight the monsters, you get the items. You've got like Geed from Diablo 2 is back. I mean, this is a very Diablo 2 themed expansion is really what it seems like. And you can gamble with him, you can trade stuff. Chris decided that he wanted to put the trade experience on the website directly into the game, so now we get like gambling and haggling and all kinds of cool stuff that the player base totally wants. Kind of mixed on that. More so what I'm thinking about is everything else that's not the expansion. So we'll see. The expansion should be cool, but there's so many other things to think about right now, to be honest. Such as the new Battle Royale mode that's been added back into the game. I'm sort of excited for this. I think it's pretty cool. The one thing that I'm really interested in is diving into this like Battle Royale specific skill tree, and the fact that we can have like the skill tree just on the left side of the screen. Can we get that for normal PoE GGG? I'd like a little, like an option to have like a little passive skill tree up on the left. That'd be cool, dude. So maybe next league, or maybe sometime soon we can get one of those, please. Yes. I think that this is a really interesting mode. I think that PoE does need at least something else that can maybe keep people active and playing outside of the normal game, and I think this is something pretty cool. I've already seen a bunch of streamers playing it. There's apparently already a bunch of bugs, and like there's one thing where people are just completely immune to damage and they can't be killed, so they just win. hopefully those get fixed, but it's going to be available on the weekends, not the weekend of the actual release, but every other weekend for this whole next patch. So hopefully it goes well, hopefully they iterate on it a little bit, and we get some cool stuff out of it. That would be pretty nice. I'm all for GGG doing new and interesting things. But that's going to be it, boys. I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me. The new expansion could be really good, and I'm also a little scared. So hopefully the new player experience and the casual player experience doesn't get it completely annihilated. Hopefully the new skills are pretty cool, and hopefully the nerfs don't hurt too bad. But it really kind of feels like Chris has just been like getting ready with that Nerf Bat and just taking practice swings for the last 3 months. Because it really seems like we're getting nerfed really hard. Remember, boys, if you enjoy this content, make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in Rayclast. And I will see you all in 3.15 Expedition League.